Welcome, everybody. Mike, what do you want to go by in here?
Just call me Mike, it's fine.
Okay, I was like, I didn't know if you wanted me to call you the Axe or Mike.
I had to mute the sound. The sound was going to reverb to my speakers.
No worries. All right, so Mike, tell us a little bit about your gaming history. Tell us why you're here, basically, and beyond me saying, come here and do this with me.
So I've been playing MMOs now pretty hardcore since about 2001, no, 2002. Starting with EverQuest 2 and Final Fantasy 14, or Final Fantasy 11. And then while I was playing those, I played Warcraft 3 and Warcraft 3 The Frozen Throne pretty heavily in the meantime. Before that, I played Diablo 2 for a number of years. And then when I started playing WoW in 2003, I started taking it a bit more serious. Hardcore was a little too much for me in Diablo 2, especially with some of the better gear I'd come up with at the time. And then as time moved on and I got into WoW pretty heavily, I started raiding when Molten Core was released. And from that point on, I joined a guild called Exodus on a server called Skull Crusher, which they were pretty high up there, and they were pretty well ranked. They did most of Naxxramas as well through the end of Classic. But at one point, Skull Crusher was so painful to log into that every time we had a 60-man raid roster, because every time someone got disconnected from the server, it would easily be 2 hours before you could get back in, usually 14 to 1,500 people in line. So we ended up transferring to a server called Smolderthorn, where I joined a guild at the time called KISS that eventually became Rebirth. And you were in Rebirth with me as well. And I don't think you were there for the whole thing, but we eventually became we were in the top 5 for every boss kill in Naxxramas and Encourage, except for Cthulhu, because Europe did not have to re-clear the whole dungeon. So the first US guild was only 7, I believe. And then in Naxxramas minus
the last 2 bosses, I believe.
we were 4 for Kel'Thuzad. We were number 2 for Saffron. It was not Noth the Plaguebringer, the guy that you did the safety dance. I can't remember his name. We were number 7 for him.
Right, and yes, I joined right at the end of BWL. I think you guys had just either downed Nefarian for the first time, or maybe it was like your 3rd time downing him.
No, I think you were a little farther than that, because I know Scott was there for a lot of the kills. I want to say it was like a month before Encourage dropped.
Right. It was right. It was before Encourage and right after BWL.
Yeah. I think we've been clearing Nefarian for about 3 months when almost 4 months probably when Encourage dropped.
And then since then, have you taken any games as seriously?
Yes. So I was pretty serious in Burning Crusade. Only stuff in the top 100 though. And but that was right at the time I was graduating high school and getting into college, so that completely slumped my schedule up around the first month of Burning Crusade. And then Wrath of the Lich King I took pretty serious for the first 2 raids. We were in the top 30 for all the kills in Ulduar. We only broke top 15 in 1. At that time I was on Thunderlord.
Yeah, which was an atrocious server to try to be that high ranked.
Yeah, it wasn't very good. I mean, the only decent. All the people that I raided with on Thunderlord ended up going to Supermassive on what server were they on? I don't remember.
I don't.
But they transferred over there to try to rebuild the guild in Cataclysm, because they were just struggling to find decent members. And what ended up happening more or less was when they got there, it was just easier for the good players to join up with Supermassive because they just had a big break off at the time. But so Wrath of the Lich King, I transferred to Thunderlord, and after Ulduar and WoW, I kind of really started stepping it back, because the raids, especially Trial of the Crusader and Trial of the Champion, they were just awful, and I didn't even really care for Ice Crown Citadel very much.
Mm-hmm.
I mainly did the 10-mans with Ice Crown Citadel, but that was the point in which in WoW that I really backed off. But when Final Fantasy 14 came out, I took it up again, and I was our group was the number 14th for Twintania. We before the major nerfs came through and like the clear rates exploded through the roof for the second coil, which was 6, 7, and 8. We were mostly through the clockwork, and we had we went back and forth on Ravana. There was chances that we probably could have gotten her a lot closer. That was a fucking cool fight. And that one took a lot of precision too. There was a lot of people that couldn't do that one. There was 1.5 million instant kill mechanics, and mechanics like you had to take 2 steps to live or die, and 3 steps would kill you or 1 step would kill you. It had to be a perfect 2 steps.
So needless to say, though, you have a lot of MMO experience, a lot of end-game experience.
Yes, mostly hardcore experience,
so,
yeah.
Beyond that, though, let's talk about a little bit of what you do. You don't have to go into super detail about what you do for a career, but it does give us a little bit of background on the fact that you're kind of knowledgeable on servers and stuff like that, right?
Yep. Yeah, no, I am a senior system engineer. I work for a big HIT company called Cerner. We're the second biggest electronic medical record EMR provider in the entire world. Number 1 is currently Epic, even though our solution suite's quite a bit bigger. But EMRs are more based on hospital politics necessarily than functionality.
Right, exactly.
I've been doing that for about 7 years now. My expertise is specifically in HP servers, mostly blades and enclosures, but also DLs, ELs. And I specifically work in things like shared services like DNS, DHCP, up to layer 3 networking, enterprise admin based stuff. My role is very much a mix between what you'd consider a data center engineer, a system administrator, and an enterprise administrator. I cover pieces of both. We work very heavily with Hyper-V and VMware, though we're starting to lean more towards Hyper-V these days.
Which will actually, this is all going to come up later in our conversation. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that you have a expertise in this particular things that we're going to be talking about, and maybe not the fact that you're not like a game designer or anything like that, but you do understand servers, and that when you do bring up your arguments that you're going to be real with them and not try to hold anything back, because you do have a professional take on what it takes to run a server.
Correct. We have the 4th largest Windows 80 in the world, and we have the 3rd largest data center cluster in the world. Like we're not a tiny company. We have well over 140,000 physical servers in our data center that all exist in one town. They're not spread across the country. Now they are geographically spread apart across the town, but yes, no, we are not a minor company. We have well over $20 billion in infrastructure. And when it comes to like our actual AD and networking skills, there's not another company besides maybe Microsoft or Amazon that can touch us with a 10-foot stick. And when it comes to like an ISP perspective, we are a bigger fish in the pond than they are.
Yeah. So anyway, getting back to talking about games, the first thing I want to kind of talk about is we're looking at Ashes of Creation. And the big thing that we talked about the first time that you and I spoke about this was we have a gamer coming into the field and creating a studio and putting his own money into it. Now we're not going to talk about actual numbers because that doesn't matter. But what we're looking at is whether or not we think that a gamer can actually develop a game, and what kind of things that we're going to fear from that, and what we like about that. So, Mike, how do you feel about that?
Well, starting from the gamer perspective, for the most part, a gamer making a game, short of breadth of expanse, what I mean by that is their vision. Overall, a gamer probably will make a better game than most game developers, especially game developers that have been making games for 15, 20 years and have probably lost touch. The downside to that is I know for this particular studio, the guy's kind of a hardcore gamer, And building your game around the hardcore, we already saw what kind of failure can happen with that, i.e., WildStar in the last couple of years, and every Korean game that ever existed. So there's a lot of positives, but the biggest thing is hopefully there is enough more game developers on the staff that make sure the game has enough breadth for casuals, because while the game lives on a hardcore community, it still needs casuals to survive.
Exactly. Yeah. So we also talked briefly about the funding and how the Kickstarter campaigns go, and you actually had a lot to say on how you feel about Kickstarter campaigns for video games. Can you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah. So let's talk about the good first, so I'm not just shitting all over this, 10 feet sideways. It is good that the CEO put his money into it, started it, found the employees. The employees are putting some of their money into it. That's a good thing. It's not a, golden parachute or an absolute win stick, but it is a good thing. I do like the fact that, just like another really popular game, Indivisible, they had money put into it, not a small amount, before they even launched a Kickstarter campaign. I wish they would have had a playable alpha like Indivisible did before they launched the Kickstarter. Which, I mean, with the MMO, that's a little bit harder, but we're close to there. Would have been nice if they would have had a playable alpha for people to kind of get an idea of how it felt. Um, that and I could see in a lot of the pre-alpha footage, there's some rough points that probably should have been smoothed out a little bit more before, but at least they came to the table with functioning things, and not just, bullshit tech demos that we see so often, or glorified screenshots, and the end result never looks as good as the original tech demo they put out.
Right.
That being said, there's a lot of bad effects with Kickstarter too. If Star Wars: The Old Republic taught us anything, that is listening to your fans can ruin a fucking game in a single patch. And that
You're not wrong.
game, they listened way too much to the whiners on the servers, which, to be entirely honest, the rating in that game was so super easy. Like, we could literally raid the hardest difficulty with 6 semi-okay people and 2 mouth breathers. We just needed the 2 mouth breathers because there was a couple fights where each person had to do a specific role, like the council.
Mm-hmm.
But
mm-hmm.
The last boss and that guy with the falling platforms that, people dying buffed the boss up. So there are some good things and bad things. Having Kickstarter backers, I think, puts a lot of negative toxicity in the community. If you look at any Kickstarter project that's even the slightest bit late, and let me tell you, almost every Kickstarter project is going to be late. The people putting these together generally don't understand development processes and what it takes to bring a product to market, which is why almost every Kickstarter project averages 4 to 6 months late, with the video games being closer to a year and a half late.
Yeah, the good thing with them is they put a better realistic than most video games have, especially since they only had footage. They said, okay, from this Kickstarter, we're looking at 2 to 3 years away. So they gave themselves a plenty of time to at least get some kind of, development under their belt before they were like, okay, we need to really rush this. So they did give themselves time.
Correct, just as long as they don't pull a Star Citizen.
Well.
So, like I said, that's one of the things. Being a little too... I don't want to say that endears you to your fans, but I think that gives the fans maybe a little bit more creative control than they should have.
Mm-hmm.
The average MMO player, even the hardcores, technically want everything to be broken in their favor and gimped for other people's favors. And so bringing in fans like that and bringing in Kickstarter backers and stuff generally isn't a good idea in the creative process. I personally disagree with it. There is no reason that they should. I mean, I do agree that publishers and AAA gaming are not helping these days either. But that being said, hopefully they can get past some of the Kickstarter bullshit and still come out with a good game, because there was a couple really good games, Shovel Knight being one of the most notable, that have come out with Kickstarter.
It's an excellent game, and there's many more of them that have came from that one. Yeah,
exactly. And if you bought the original, you keep getting if you brought what they call it treasure trove now, but the original $25 purchase has gotten you every additional campaign. Which actually, the last one, Spectre Knight, coming out, that was probably the strongest one in the series, short of Shovel Knight. The wall jumping mechanics and the air slashes were fucking fantastic. That was
I haven't had
a pleasurable experience.
A chance to get my hands on it yet, but it's one of my games that's on my wish list on Steam. I just haven't had the money to put into it yet because of all the other things that have came out.
Yeah, I'd get the Treasure Trove version because the Shovel Knight campaign's great. Plague Knight's a little weaker, but it's still not horrible. His story's a little funnier, at least in that part. But there was also Broken Age and Wasteland 2 that were good games. And then there were some niche markets that were great games too. Hyper Life Drifter, which is a platform with some interesting mechanics and kind of more of a top-down. Fantastic. I love that game. Super Hot, which was a puzzle FPS game I have as well. That was a very fun game. Darkest Dungeons was a great dungeon crawler, but man, you better love hard and and a shitload of RNG. But and there was others too. Original Sin, FTL, Banner Saga. They were all great games, but they definitely had very niche markets. Hyper Life Drifter was not for casuals. Darkest Dungeons is not for people who do not want to grind.
Now I just picked up Divinity 2, the original Sin 2, and that game has a Dungeons and Dragons mode where you can create your own campaigns, and I think that was a phenomenal choice by them.
Yes.
It's
remember Divinity 2 wasn't kickstarted though. Only Divinity 1 was.
Right, didn't somebody else buy the rights for Divinity and recreate Divinity 2, or is it the same studio? I can't remember.
It was something like that, but they had publisher backing this go around versus using Kickstarter.
Right. So, how do you feel? Just to kind of, I don't know if we actually talked about that in our bullets, but how do you feel about the fact that the studio has decided to not take up a publisher and just kind of go their own direction and do everything themselves and not try to get a AAA publisher behind them?
I have mixed feelings about that. So some games have done it right. Just recently, God, what's the name of that studio? I think it was Ninja Studios did. What was it? Selenia Hellblade. I'll have to
I'm
look
not
up the name
familiar.
of the game. Yeah, they did a recent game for about $40. It was Serenia or Setsuna Hellblade, something like that. It was a wonderful game, kind of a dark and damp feeling game dealing with like psychosis and whatnot, and kind of coined a term that's called like indie AAA. And that has brought in the idea that, hey, we can make $40 games that look just as good as half of these big AAA games that come out.
Right.
And we can make an optimal, non-buggy playing experience at half the price. Because there's a lot of games that can't handle the AAA price tag. That's just all there is to it. So shaking off a publisher does give them a lot of ability to not stifle their creative vision and be able to act in the ways they want to act. But I do think sometimes publishers, pull in some of the weird kind of getting out there shit, or maybe keep toxic environments from becoming such a big deal. Because once again, sometimes, especially high-end gamers, start looking down and pushing casuals out too much. When, yes, you need the hardcore community for the game to survive, but, the hardcores need the casuals to snack on. Or, I mean, that's not entirely accurate, but the analogy makes sense.
Right.
You're not actually eating them, but for an auction house to work and for people to be able to scalp the market and enjoy the economy, there's got to be enough people in it to lose to have a couple winners. If you've got all winners, you can't have any losers. Therefore, nobody's actually doing anything.
Right. Yeah. Going to a publisher that it was a AAA and combined with another AAA, Blizzard, for instance, the instant that they joined with Activision, I almost stopped following them because their World of Warcraft scene has just suffered since then, and now they've got Destiny 2 on the Blizzard launcher. That's just a market scheme if I've ever seen one, and that's what I'm afraid of when you look at AAA publishers getting involved with indie studios.
Oh yeah, well, and I don't even know if I'd even consider Blizzard an indie studio. I still to this day don't understand why they even went down that route. The game I was thinking of was Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's see. So the next thing that we're going to talk about briefly, I see some notes here on our outline, but I'm not really sure how they tied in the goals section of this.
So some some things that are missing currently, and of the stuff of all the stuff I'd kind of gone through and looked at is there isn't really like an overall goal to the game defined yet. It seems to kind of still be missing. That's something that could be rectified in time, but I'd figure with an alpha there would at least kind of be a big bad guy or like an ultimate goal to work towards. And it's kind of drifting. Like, some people can define it one way, some people can define it another way. Eventually, you kind of want that idea to be gone. But that could also be a lack of data being released causing some of that as well.
Exactly, and that's what they were saying, is that they don't want any storyline leaks. They just they had to struggle to get them to release the name of the world. The only thing that they've said is that all of the races used to live on this world. They left through these portals, and now they've come back to reclaim it. And that's the only thing that has been said. They're trying to keep the story under wraps so that it's more immersive and it's not spoiled before release.
Yeah, I don't imagine this is going to be a Final Fantasy 14 kind of driven game. I just meant in general, the game doesn't have like an overall goal. What I mean by that is like, in WoW, the overall goal is hit max level, grind good gear. Yeah. In a game that's not crafting based, we know that means okay dungeons and raiding. But in a game like this where they've announced where crafting is going to be more of where all your great gear comes from, and you're more or less raiding or grinding for the materials needed to make that crafting, the goal becomes murky at that point. That's more of what I meant is.
So I think what they stated, and I'm not 100% on this, so don't quote me and don't say that this is like fact, because I'm not part of the development team or anything. But I think what they stated is that like most of your good gear will come from doing dungeons and raids and stuff, but it will be able to be broken down by crafters and not mass produced but reproduced.
Yeah, very very Star Wars: The Old Republic kind of stuff.
Exactly, yeah. Which has merit, but possibility. We'll discuss that later. I just wanted to kind of touch on that so that we weren't like completely saying, "Oh no, this is going to be bad game because there's no goal." There is going to be a goal. We just don't know what it is yet.
Yes, and it could be one of those games that the goal drifts. I just know right now overall, and I don't even just mean the game. I also mean the studio as well. And we'll get onto some of that later when we talk about like the referral system and whatnot. They in general don't seem to have a final goal in mind either. They seem to be actively pursuing 3 overall goals, which might not be the greatest choice as well.
I think they stated they have 4 pillars, and I can't remember what they are right now. But again, we'll touch on that probably in another podcast. We'll go over the pillars that they base their game on and what we like and dislike about that. But beyond that, the game is pretty, and I think a lot of that has to do with the Unreal Engine. How do you feel about that choice to use the Unreal Engine in an MMO?
Well, so at least they didn't pick Unity.
Right.
This is an asset flip. With the way Steam has gone in the last 4 years, I have to feel at least 98% positive that's at least not fucking Unity. That engine should be blown off the face of this earth.
I would definitely agree.
So that's a big choice, is they at least picked Unity. Or they just didn't pick Unity, I should say. Now, one thing I will say, though, is for an MMO, I know WoW started off with kind of a shaved-down Unity engine that they kind of sort of made themselves, but was still very Unity-based. Unreal will give you a little more cartoony feel, not quite as realistic. It's kind of got the oversaturated colors, line sharpness in some colors that don't exist for the deep colors. So from an artistic perspective, it's going to be a little more probably on the cartoony, slightly grimdark from what I've seen, but not like, it's not going to be like a nice, crisp, like Final Fantasy kind of sharpness. It's going to be more of a WoW kind of cartoony, oversaturated feel.
I think with Unreal Engine 4, you're going to get something in between there.
You will, but it's still overall, even the screenshots, like the one you have up, still has a bit more oversaturated kind of cartoony feel versus a realistic feel. Like exactly. It's gonna make like it's gonna look like everything's painted in semi-gloss and high gloss paint across the entire world. Everything, including like glass or grass, is light deflective. Like everybody knows real grass isn't gonna reflect light and have a shimmer to it
unless there's like water on it, and that's not gonna be all day.
Or somebody went and just like, I'm just gonna use an airbrush and acrylic spray all the grass in my yard so it doesn't grow anymore. So it's gonna have that look, like it's got a sheen to it, like a paint sheen, which isn't a bad thing. It's just if you don't like cartoony, you're gonna be looking at a bit more of a cartoony kind of world.
It will not be as bad as WoW's cartooniness or some of the other games that are out there, but it is going to have less of a realistic feel than something like Final Fantasy does. Even though Final Fantasy still has a little bit of, it's just a different art style, I think.
Yes. And the other thing is choosing to use, because everything I've seen so far, they're straight up using the full Unreal 4 with no modifications. They are going to lose in the fact that instead of editing the engine for their purposes or building an engine, choosing an engine is going to add limitations down the road, things they can implement, things they can't implement, things they can't figure out, things they have to work around. And it comes down to, are they going to save any time in the system they've built versus being able to work around the limitations of using somebody else's engine?
Right.
They have a lot of very unique things planned in this game. Other games have used everything they have in it. They're not using any 100% unique system that hasn't existed somewhere in the game. Most of those haven't worked out very well, so we'll see how well they can implement a lot of that in the Unreal Engine without having major issues or setbacks or bugs.
So now what they did say is that they're going to take the front end of Unreal and they're going to scrap the server side part of it and rebuild that to be more compatible with massive amounts of users. Is that something that you were concerned about, or is that in the right direction? Or
so when you're scrapping the server side of things, you're specifically talking about the processing overload, encapsulation and rendering time, TCP IP stack. How do you handle, optimize, and monitor, police, and make modular segments so you have no downtime in a server based environment to be able to regulate flow, to be able to pull a server out to fix it, be able to put it back in while everything's saying streaming and going forward. Hard drive crashes happen. System boards go out. Currently, right now, if anybody is in the server scene, X and C chips that specifically have come from Korea and Taiwan have been exploding every 11 to 14 weeks. It is a constant thing since 2014 that a lot of us have been dealing with, is constant X and C replacements. Someone made a bad design in a couple of the chipsets, and that chip just gets overloaded with voltage that it can't handle. It eventually gets worn down until it just pops. You have to basically replace the system board. For anybody that's unfamiliar, system board is the same thing as a motherboard. The reason in a server we call it a system board is the RAID is not in the chipset. You actually have a RAID accelerator controller with a RAID accelerator battery that holds your settings so that if you lost the system board, your partition tables are still maintained and are still written to the either your HBA if you're using SAN storage, or written to the actual partition table that exists on the board. And in this case, the hard drives that go into the front are either going to be in RAID 1, RAID 0, or RAID 5. Any regular company is going to use RAID 1. Nobody's going to use RAID 0, RAID 5 unless they have to. And if you're going to use RAID 5, you're actually going to use a storinator or some kind of drive cabinet, because you're going to need a shitload of drives to have enough parity to actually be able to lose a couple. But that being said, these happen regularly on a regular basis. You can't just like hope to make it to the next downtime to survive through this. So when they redo that server side piece, we're specifically talking about optimization, network flow, prioritization, and how do we do maintenance while maintaining a high level of performance. That's not going to be anything short of latency and lag, or maybe like data encapsulation of some kind, depending on how they do their item inventory system, that the actual player is going to see. That's not going to affect any of that kind of stuff. Still, implementation is still going to be 100% code based, which is still going to be on the Unreal Engine side.
Right. Okay. So I'm actually going to skip to the last section on this outline because I think it goes more with what we're talking about, and then we'll come back to the third section. So let's talk about the referral system and what you think about the fact that this game is going to be 100% sub based and have no upfront cost.
I have no problems with subs. I prefer sub based games. I do not like the free to play model. I don't think the free to play model works very well. I know a lot of people nowadays prefer that. I don't think there's anything positive to the free to play model, and I don't see many free to play games that survive very well long term, or they have active players that play every day for a whole 12 months. People can say they do, But in most of those games, they don't actively play every single day for a full 12 months without taking a break.
I do actually like how World of Warcraft did it. They gave you, 20 levels for free. You can play to level 20 for free, and then once you get to 20, you have to buy the game and subscribe. I think that that's a great way to get people interested in the game, and while having a free-to-play model that's not, like, completely overbearing. I think that they should probably explore an option like that. Maybe not right away, but eventually. What do you think about that?
I absolutely agree, because Final Fantasy does all the way to 35.
That's awesome.
But you even get all the way to where you can do the classes. Yeah, you can unlock all the classes and everything. And you don't have that bullshit that some games have, where you have limitation of your inventory, limitation, like your experience is cut in half, and you can only like have so many support characters. It's got a support character system and things like that. Like there's no limitations, so that's a nice way of doing it. I do like that you can use your referrals of other people in the game to pay for game time. I think that's a great idea. I don't think there's a downside to that. It keeps gamers that are on a budget that need that quote unquote free to play have an option to get game time paid for. It's a very good form of positive reinforcement that most games are missing these days. But that being said, in the referral system, with what you can redeem your referral points for, that's the only positive one. Everything else I've seen in the referral system, I see lots of very negative long-term effects and lots of very negative short-term effects.
So, before we jump into the rare money exchanges and all that stuff, let's talk a little bit about cash shop items and stuff. So, everybody I know hates cash shops items. For the most part, we don't like to see anything that you can buy that affects gameplay. How do you feel about the idea that they've come forward and said it's going to be cosmetic only and it won't be able to be put on the auction house?
I'm still a little mixed. So the best cosmetic cash shop I have ever seen is Final Fantasy 14. Mm-hmm. I don't 100% agree with it, but it's the best. Literally all you can buy from their cash shop is past festival items. So every festival of every year gets a unique new set of cosmetic only gear that goes with it. And then when that festival hits, you can now for like $3 buy last year's set. It might be $7 now or something. And then the only other things you can buy are like 3 or 4 specific dyes that can be obtained in the game. Now, the dyes you buy, you can't put on the auction house. The dyes that your retainers bring back, you can. That's the best implementation of it that I have seen cash shop wise, because it's stuff that everybody could have maintained or gotten at some point. That being said, I think it would be better if during that festival each year, some of the tokens that you get to buy that gear, you could get last year's or the year before stuff and not necessarily have to go straight to the cash shop. That's the only like negative part I see on that. I honestly personally think, short of getting game time out of it, there shouldn't be a cash shop at all. I do not like cash shops. I am very much of the pre-2005 MMO. If I have to pay something besides my sub, no.
Right, and I completely agree. I don't like costumes being in there. I don't like things being added to a cash shop. It's not my favorite thing in the world. I understand why it's there, because revenue reasons. It gets you more money into your studio. It lets you, beyond your sub money. I get the reasons for it. I just don't care for it, and I hardly ever take place in any kind of cash shop buying, except for in like League of Legends, where that's really all there is a cash shop. But the next thing I want to talk about is using those referral things to buy stuff from the cash shop, and the potential of them saying that you could pull out in real money and the problems with that.
Well, so using the referral money to buy stuff in the cash shops, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I mean, personally, I still think the cash shop should go away. But I still think that's a much better use of that referral money, though I think every user should really be using that on game time instead.
I do too, 100%. That's what I would be using it on.
And everything I've seen so far makes it look like the game time exchange rate for the referrals is going to be very much in the positive as well.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning it looks like about every 2 referrals gets you a month and a half or so.
Not quite. It's so if it's a $15, you'll get $3 for each person. So basically, it takes 5 referrals to get a free month, is from what we understand.
Yeah, some of the screen caps I saw looked like the numbers were a bit higher than that, but once again, until the system's in place, none of that really matters because by the time the system comes out, it could literally be, oh, now you've got to refer 10 people. But once again, referring 10 people for a free month still might be a lot better than, paying the $15 or the $8 or, whatever the monthly fee ends up turning out to be. Or if they have mixed ones, I know it's real common nowadays to have like a $5 cheaper option.
Now, there is no trickle down effect either, though. So if I referred you and you referred somebody else, I would only get what cash you put in percentage wise. I wouldn't get the full 15. So it's not going to be pyramid scheme like. So there won't ever be like everybody plays for free, or except for the last 5 people.
Yep. The one real big downside to that's going to be is eventually what's going to happen is, or what might happen right off the get-go, is you're going to have people that will go and post a forum post with their code and get a whole bunch of free time because they're on a forum that a whole bunch of people frequent and they decided to use that code.
Or they're a really big name and they have, somebody on Twitch or YouTube put out their code.
Yeah, YouTubers do that shit a lot with Uber.
By the way, I'll post my code here in a minute, guys, just so you know. Yeah. I'm just kidding. I'm not that big yet.
Yeah, where YouTubers, get all of their, 1.5 million subscribers to use their Uber codes so they get 1.5 million free Uber rides. That's the biggest thing. Like, and the problem is part of having that system, they're going to pay more of each sub, and of their revenue is going to go into have to be able to police that shit. They could have easily set themselves up in such a way that they didn't have to make that policing system. Mm-hmm. Now they're going to have that policing system. That's going to be 5 to 7 individuals and a manager who has to talk to other departments in an extra meeting. Every department's going to have now talking about that policy, where they could have divided this up in a better way. They didn't have to deal with any of that. That being said, if it wasn't for the fact that this referral system's actively going to take money away from development, I wouldn't care. But they've already stated in such a way that every person that refers, they're going to take some of the money that you would have paid towards development and pay that to you for getting players in the game. I don't see as like, I like when like cash shop items are like for charity purposes. That's cool. I have no problems with that. But when you're actually actively taking away development for the game, and a game's overall resource pool gets cut by a third due to referrals, now that might be a little extreme, but some of the scenarios they gave saw that of the $70 possible that they would earn off of it, they could only see, in the right circumstances, they could see it be as low as they only get $45 of it. That's a pretty big chunk taken off. That's $30.
That is a huge chunk.
Close. You're getting pretty close to half there.
Mm-hmm.
So in that kind of scenario, it does better if everybody just buys the full game, because then we get more patches. Because if they're not making, because here's another big thing, and I don't know how many people know this. Anybody who starts up any kind of tech company needs to understand you are going in the red for the first 5 years. You will not make any money. You will not be positive. Getting your infrastructure in place is extremely expensive. Getting your infrastructure, all your patching, getting a deliverable product is expensive. Even companies like SoundCloud aren't even in the positive yet.
Right.
And that's been around a couple years. So building into an MMO like this, part of what the publishers are doing is they are giving you money so that you can step into the positive. So giving the option of making money in this way takes away their ability to make a bigger, better overall game, instead of using it to help get their infrastructure up to date, paid off, and be able to upgrade it. Because the next upgrade we start talking, I don't know which particular servers or what backends they're using, but a good example is AIX IBM hardware is outrageously expensive. You want to double the CPU and the memory in an AIX box, that's going to be $1 to $2 million. You want to do it in a regular Red Hat node, that's about $150,000.
That's crazy.
So I don't know what hardware choices that they've made, but giving away a large portion of your active resources just to, be like, hey, thanks for getting people on the game, isn't a great plan. Losing a little bit of game time for referrals is a much better solution.
So I'm not 100% on this because we discussed the real money thing, though. In addition to all of these things, we discussed that they had maybe mentioned doing a real money exchange and how much we don't like that, and how Diablo 3 basically showed everybody why this is a bad idea. Can you elaborate on that? And just so everybody knows, I haven't personally found where they stated this. Mike said that he saw something mentioned about it in one of the 800 videos he watched over the last 3 weeks or a week and a half or so. I don't remember how long ago we started watching these together. But how do you feel about that potential?
I think the tax portion of it alone is already enough to make things painful. The amount of taxes, just like with what ends up in cryptocurrencies, can be nuts. Like, a lot of people are mining, they think it's great money, blah, blah, blah. The second the IRS decides they want their chunk of that, which is one of the reasons why the Diablo 3 cash shop went down, people are going to see issues. Like, it could easily put the game and the company under. That's the first major problem I see with it.
And by the way, if you're into cryptocurrency, please stop posting on Facebook. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody cares.
Exactly. Cryptocurrencies are very volatile. If you want to do that stuff, that's fine. I help people do cryptocurrency stuff. Consumes a lot of power. But go exchange in $1 million of your cryptocurrency, and let me tell you how much the IRS asks for the next day.
Right, exactly. And that's something that we fear with real money things. I personally will never pull real money from there because it just sets you up. It does set you up for a bad tax day.
Oh yeah. It also pushes casuals out of the game. Too many people try to play the game as a job and destroy the auction house because they're trying to make their actual money. It also makes players become amazing loot whores because now all drops are dollar signs and not just straight, whatever. Like real money systems add a lot of very major problems.
Or and even once again, if it's just off those referrals, man. Even if it's just from referrals, people are still going to be trying to make this a valid source of revenue instead of looking at it as a game.
Correct. That's exactly what it's going to do. And now, once he goes into that 4 to 7 man team that have to watch the referral system, now they need a bigger one that has to be monitored, that has to be policed, that has to be enforced. There has to be a team that handles disputes. They have to maintain the system and do regular updates to it. Now the development staff has to take that into account when they think of core gameplay, enjoyment for users, new and existing functionality. You got to think about how is this referral system, or how is this new item we're adding, or how is this going to affect it with the current systems we have in place, not just counting what classes do we have, what class balances we're working on, what's the new raid. Now this whole system is a part of it, and the cash money shop does part of that too. It definitely ties up resources in that doesn't necessarily make positive money at the end of the day.
Right, exactly. We're going to take a big leap here, though. We're going to change subjects because I'm tired of talking about the money. I'm tired of talking about the structure. Let's talk about the game. Let's get away from all of the back end stuff. Let's talk about the actual game. How do you feel about the class system and the subclass system?
First of all, one word: tank.
Right. We discussed this in detail. We don't like the name of that. It's not a horrible name, but we just do not care for the name of that class.
Yeah, the awesome tank picture that will be popping up with the flames and the scoop and the big cannon. I'm sure it'll probably get changed at some point, but when you have classes like Paladin and Warrior that look like they're probably going to be tank-esque, and you have a class called a tank, what does that even mean? Does it use an axe? Does it have a shield? Is it actually a tank? I mean, I wouldn't be so... What was that old WoW commercial where they had the Nissan Frontier or something, and it was a car driving around crushing all the monsters and everything?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't remember that one.
An actual tank on there, driving through, I'm okay with that. If they want to actually put a full regular metal tank and they want to call it tank, sure.
Or even in another WoW commercial, the Mohawk class, after Mr. T, they had the Mohawk. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're gonna call something a tank, let's get specific right now and let's call it a Guardian. Let's call it something that's not so metal and scoop and cannon like. That is pretty much our only complaint as to class names. Not because we don't like it, it's just very okay, here it is. this is. I could go get a million pictures of different styles of tanks and put them on the cast. This is a funny representation of what we joked about when we heard the name tank. But beyond that, we really do. I think we're both kind of excited about the classes that are out there. A little concerned about Bard personally. I'm a little concerned at how they're going to balance that, if it's going to be a hybrid class. They said it's going to have a place other than just being a hybrid class. That makes me feel a little bit better. What classes are you excited for, and everything? What do you like about this?
Well, so just the last point on the tank. It's a very red dot on a white sheet. That's the only problem we have with the word tank. It is a red dot on a white sheet. But I do like the classes are very D&D like. I like the more RPG traditional classes that a lot of games have kind of gotten away from in recent years. They've kind of, Final Fantasy 14 did a really bad job of this, where they took the awesome class list of stuff that existed in Final Fantasy 11 and almost scrunched that all into their first 8 classes, and now they're struggling. Everything they add basically just does what another class already does.
Mm-hmm.
So some of that's going to depend on how modern MMO they are and how old school RPG they are.
Exactly, and the thing that I fear, like exactly what when they were bringing out these new classes in the last Final Fantasy, is they put that trailer out with those two fighting on top of that hand and the statue and everything, and I was thinking, man, Stormborn's going to bring Dancer back, because that lady is dancing all up on that hand and everything, and then they announced it was Red Mage, and I was disappointed. I don't want to see classes like that where I get super excited. I don't want teasers. Just let it come out when it comes out.
Yeah, no, I agree. That being said, the Samurai and Red Mage additions to Final Fantasy 14 were both great.
Yeah, they're great classes. I played both. I played Red Mage. I haven't had my hands on Samurai yet.
Samurai plays mostly like a Dragoon. It's not like that special. But once again, all the melee in that game play fairly similar, so that's kind of a neither here nor there. Red Mage was a good addition that game really needed, a very more mid-range kind of class. But that being said, that brings up a good point, is how modern are they going to go? And then another thing is, we say the classes are very D&D like. For anybody who's played 3.5, 4 didn't quite so much have this problem, but it kind of did. And then now 5, when you flip through the D&D playbook and you look through the classes, some classes have some very specific use cases, and those only. There's a lot of classes in 5.0 that aren't heavily played because they only have 1 or 2 play styles. They're only useful in this one kind of campaign. And then, you just have this huge list of garbage spells that you never equip because, what the fuck am I going to use the rest of this for? So it being very D&D-like can also have a negative aspect to it. But that being said, it also leads to the old WoW style when they went very D&D-like with the talent trees, and we got very cookie-cutter builds, too.
Yeah, so the only thing I'll say about the D&D classes is, as long as it's not like 4th edition where it's basically pre-planned for you, I'm okay with D&D style classes. 4th edition was god-awful. That was the worst edition of D&D ever. And 5th edition has gotten a lot better with the release of the new books and the revisions to the classes to make all of them feel like they're beneficial. Now, I play D&D quite a bit. I haven't been at my current D&D game in 4 weeks because I started a new job. But I love D&D, and I think that they've done. I think Wizards of the Coast has done a great thing with the new 5th edition rules, and they're only getting better at it with these revisions.
I absolutely agree. No, there's no class in 5th edition that doesn't have a place. What I mean by that is, there's classes that are definitely party classes. There's classes that are more solo classes. And if we look at original WoW, they very much had that. There was classes that did really well in a party, but sucked solo leveling. And that D&D like aspect, I wonder if we're going to see some of the same with that. I hope not. I hope there's not a lot of cookie cutter. I hope there's room for customization, but I also don't want that retarded glyph system and oh, hey, we made our talent trees so you have a couple of spare choice points on talents that are mostly aesthetic or tiny changes that nobody fucking cares about.
So, but going back to our first topic, a thing that I fear is that Steven really favors mages, and I'm afraid that since he'll probably be playing the game that he's creating, that mages are going to see a lot of buffs and not so many nerfs, which makes me a little nervous because I don't play a mage personally. What class do you see yourself playing, Mike?
In my case, I'll probably most likely be a warrior, or a berserker.
some kind of melee hit hard kind of class.
In your face, high damage, maybe a little bit more glass cannon.
So
if they end up coming something fairly battle mage like, I like battle mage style classes like red mage in Final Fantasy quite a bit. But I for years I played, like in my classic days, I played hunter, but then I played shaman exclusively from that point on. And in Final Fantasy, I've always played Dragoon and Warrior, so I tend to be more of the upfront in your face kind of heavier classes, not so much into the speed like pokey classes, even though in Final Fantasy I was pretty proficient in quite a few of the classes though.
And me personally, I really hope that Bard plays a lot like Final Fantasy XI's Dancer, because that class was engaging and fun for me. And so was Blue Mage, and those were melee spellcasters that I just really enjoyed. And I'm just hoping that that's something that Bard will look at. Something that does concern me, though, is let's first talk about subclasses. How do you feel about the fact that you can take a warrior, add mage to it, and instead of charging like a straight line, you teleport to them if you add that augment to your rush ability or your charge ability? What do you think of that?
I am on the fence with that one. I don't want to comment on this one too much until we actually get to play with it. Here is what I like about subclasses, and here's what I don't like about subclasses.
Okay.
Final Fantasy 14 had the best subclass system I have seen. They're balanced, they're restricted to a couple. They have very meticulously looked at what each subclass gives that class and only allowed it to take skills that give it some positives. What I see this most likely coming with the more D&D like aspects is the Final Fantasy 11/Lineage style systems, where some classes are so fucking overpowered for your subclass, you basically have to run it because it makes the game easy mode. I.e., what the fuck, Blade Master and Lineage 2 and Ninja and Final Fantasy 11. Everybody having shadow clones made the healer's job so much easier. If everybody was using Utsumi, you could literally have 2 healers in a 60-man raid.
That's crazy. I hope that doesn't happen either. I fear for that too, because it's a real fear that, like, let's say you take Bard and it has to be paired with Rogue to be this Dancer style fighter, and that's the only effective way to play Bard. Well, if you pair it with Cleric, then maybe it's an off healer, but maybe it's not. I don't know. I'm not really sure either what's going to happen there. I'm hoping that when they release the class list, which should be coming out sometime soon in a blog from them, we'll get a better idea of what we're to expect, and we can go a little bit in further detail on this subclass idea.
I agree, because like going back to your original example of you using the mage to supplement warrior and make the teleport charge instead of the regular charge, we have to think about, okay, is this a cosmetic thing or does it actually help us? The first thing I could think of is, okay, maybe teleport charge lets you do it with certain line of sight restrictions that regular charge wouldn't let you charge through.
Right. Yeah, and
that would be super overpowered. But if that's not the case, then what does that charge do except for maybe make you get to your target faster?
Yeah, so I think travel time is something that we'll see. You won't have any travel time, and you won't be able to be blocked by player-created walls like
collisions.
Yeah,
collision detection.
Exactly, and they are discussing that collisions will be in the game. So if you do charge, I think that another player may be able to intercept that.
Yeah, and that being said, that first thought is, okay, now it fixes some line of sight issues that can make it super overpowered.
I do agree.
At the same time, it could just be totally cosmetic. I don't know.
They haven't really said whether there's going to be. They've stated that, like, taking the charge with the rogue would make you go into stealth while you charge, and taking it with the mage would make it a teleport charge instead. That was kind of one of their ideas with it, but they really haven't said much beyond that. If you would stay in stealth after the charge, if the teleport would ignore things, if the charge has a stun on it, would it keep the stun for the 2 different types of charge? They haven't really gone into detail, so we don't want to get a whole lot into that. We just like to say that we like the sound of it. We're fearful of what it could lead to.
Yeah, you could turn a class into just your interpretation of, if it stays a D&D like system, being able to cosmetically change skills like that, great. That lets you play it your way, you get your customizations, or it, could make you the fucking ultimate assassination character.
Exactly. And I'm hoping that that's not what happens with some of these. Although I feel like in testing, we're going to see a lot of that get fleshed out, hopefully.
Oh, yeah, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of it. I mean, because, for example, the teleport charge, probably not super useful in PvP, insanely useful in PvP.
Yeah, not useful in PvE as much, but PvP you could definitely see some. Unless, of course, you're trying to charge out of the way of like a shockwave effect or something like that, so you don't take it while you're in charge. I mean, I can see it being useful in both. Not overpowered in PvE though, but super PvP heavy.
Yeah, that's another thing is I know there's a big PvP aspect to this game. That's really going to kind of come down to a lot of their class balance choices. I will say, hopefully, they take the later WoW style approach where certain skills work different in PvP than they do work in PvE, or at least they're taking both of them into consideration before they make changes. Because look at how many years of how tumultuous and peak and valley balance changes have been in like WoW, for example.
And then now they've just separated it completely. Like you either
Mm-hmm.
have a PvP ability and you have PvE abilities, and that's what it feels like. I don't know if that's 100% true because I don't play WoW as much as I used to, but that's the way it feels.
In Cataclysm, there's a lot of skills that had a PvE effect and the PvP effect.
And I think that that's kind of what they're going to start with here. Is they're going to have like maybe this stuns for 5 seconds in PvE, but only like a second and a half in PvP. But there won't be resilience based gear. You won't have to get different gear, which I do like about their PvP system.
Oh,
but
fuck yes. Yeah, if they want to have some PvP based gear that maybe gives you a little bit more stamina or HP, go ham. But none of that resilience bullshit. That just gives you 2 full-time jobs instead of 1.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to be able to pick up my raiding gear, walk into an arena or a raid or a siege, and be able to beat face as hard as I do in PvE. Well, maybe not quite that hard, but I don't want to have to switch gear
Be
every time.
competitive, yeah, not have to
Yeah,
grind 2 sets of gear.
exactly.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, balance is going to be a big thing. Obviously, it's not on our list this time because uh, well, there's nowhere near enough info to even remotely talk about balance because the battle system isn't even that polished yet. So,
Needless to say, though, like I'm really excited. I know that Mike's a little bit skeptical, but I think he's kind of excited to see what this game brings. Would you say that's
I'm
true?
excited for any MMO. I mean, I love MMOs. My MMO scope has been cut down so recent in years because every MMO that comes out is either free to play, super anime, or just garbage. Like your MMO choice for serious MMO players that don't want to deal with free to play bullshit is literally less than 5 in
Yeah.
the current market, and only comes down to like 2 or 3 real choices.
So for merit though, I will say that ESO has one of the best free to play models that I've seen, other than the fact that they have a cash option house or cash shop house. I played it I played about 5 hours now of ESO. I played about 6 hours of Guild Wars, and I've just been going through and trying to figure out what's good for me right now, and I have not found it. And I'm hoping that Ashes will really make me want to pay for their subscription.
I would agree. I would say of the hardcore to casual scope right now, I think Final Fantasy 11 and WoW have it nailed down on you could go hardcore with it, and there is plenty to do for casuals. I'd say most of the other games in the market, you have to go either a little deeper or you have to, like, you couldn't. There's a lot of free to play games that you can't just sit down and put 8 hours into one day if you had 8 hours.
Right. ESO, you could. Guild Wars, I don't see it, but that's probably because I've never gotten to end game.
Even in in-game as dress your Barbie, the gear doesn't really change your stats a whole lot. It's more about what it looks like.
Yeah, and then I played Black Desert recently, and that's not free to play. You have to pay one time, and then you can play for free. And then they do have a sub option that gives you huge benefits. That game makes me so angry. I love the combat. I love everything about that game, except for the cash shop is way too pay for convenience. I won't say it's pay to win, but it's pay for convenience. And the grind and the RNG in that game is just fucking awful.
I would call it pay to win then, because like if every action you make in the guild shop or in the cash shop saves you 6 hours in game time, you're paying to win.
Yeah, but if you call it pay to win, then you're being one of those people. quote those people.
Yeah, like I said, I'm definitely on the. It's funny. I think Lazy Peon did it. A perfect chart of like what pre 2005 MMO players call pay to win and what post 2005 players call pay to win.
Right.
I'm definitely on the pre 2005 list, but like literally, if I work a full time job and I don't use the cash shop, I can't keep up with people who can put in 4 hours a day. That's the definition of pay to win.
Yeah, exactly. And I was so bad with BDO that I actually installed an app on my phone so that I could check my desktop from it and refresh my workers so that I would never lose time. It was awful. Like I felt like I was doing a different job at my job because every 3 hours I would have to log in and refeed my workers, give them some beer, and reset them to do what they got to do. Okay, check this again, set a timer for 3 hours, and we're good. And then at the end of 3 weeks of doing that, I was like, yeah, I'm fucking done with this.
Yeah, I can understand. That's a lot like EVE Online was, where in the beginning you had to be like on top of your stuff in the lower levels, making sure it's like every mobile game you pick up. The timers are super short in the beginning, so your first like 10 hours in the game, you've got to be attached to your phone, and then from that point on, everything's literally like once or twice a day, and then eventually gets into like once every 2 days, and you just unless you want to pay cash to keep doing actions, you don't have anything to do at that point. Yeah, I could see EVE Online was very much in that same aspect of you got to be right on top of it, and the next thing you know, it's like I couldn't even play 8 hours a day if I wanted to.
Right, exactly. Oh, one last thing. Did you get to catch the last the PAX footage that they released?
No, remember I was in Wichita last week for that stuff.
Right. So I want to briefly talk about that. You can add input if you want, but they did a gameplay of some of the developers all playing through the scenario that they released at PAX, and I think overall it was a really good gameplay. They showed some of the kinks in the game and stuff like that, but I think it was the funniest thing ever when Steven hits his teleport button on his mage, goes into the wagon and causes it to glitch out and fall on its side, and then they're still pulling it while it's on its side. The wheels are still spinning, and they're like, yeah, guys, don't worry about that. We're still working on this stuff, but we just wanted to show you that we're not going to hide it from you, but we're working on it.
Yeah, collision-based stuff.
Exactly. So it is there. They are showing us that, hey, we're not ready to release a full game. They're not hiding it from us. They've been really honest, and I do like that in a developer, but at the same time, I'm not completely opposed to them hiding a few things. So... Anyway, Mike, I just, thanks for coming out, doing the podcast with me. I'm going to try to do one every couple weeks, at least. Maybe every week. It just depends on your availability. I know that you're out of town next weekend, I think. So we probably won't get one in then, but maybe the following weekend we can do another one. I know we have an outline started for it. So hopefully in 2 weeks we'll get another one on here, and hopefully we'll have just a handful more viewers.
Yeah, it'll just depend on when I get back from Texas. I'm supposed to be back that Wednesday for work on Thursday, but 22-foot U-Haul and 910 miles. We'll see how well that works out.
So normally what I would do at this point is I would go through comments and stuff from the stream, and we would answer questions or opinionated questions because we're not developers of the game. But since we have 1 or 2 viewers this time, unless they have questions, I'm going to go ahead and cut it off. So I'll give them just a few seconds to ask anything or any comments or anything like that, and then I'll cut the stream off.
Sure. I can stay here for a couple minutes, so we don't have to rush anybody.
Cool. What games have you been playing recently? What's your most recent RPG / whatever you've been soaking the most time into?
I just finished 100% completion of Sonic Mania. I just finished Shantae and the half. What was it? Shantae, a half genie hero, and I've turned my Final Fantasy 14 account back on for Stormblood and done a little bit of that. Hoping to sink a little bit more time into that when I get back from Texas.
Cool. I personally been playing
shitty 2017.
Yeah, I agree. I've been playing Divinity 2, PlayerUnknown, and I played a little bit of Warhammer. I don't know. If you follow the stream, you see my stuff. I pretty much stream anytime I'm gaming because why not, I guess? Unless I'm super tired. I haven't been streaming as much as I normally do because I've been working late hours, which means I come home, I sit down at my computer, I beat my face onto PUBG for a little bit with friends, and then I go to bed angry, which is probably not a good way to spend your night, but...
Well, that's what happens when you play PlayerUnknown.
Oh, I definitely agree. That game is so frustrating. What else?
I mean, there's a lot of positive stuff that could come out of this overall. It really it depends. There's not a lot of information now when it comes to some stuff, and there's some things that we're taking educated guesses on, but there's also certain things that we could see a lot of the long-term effects and how a lot of this is going to play out, and we'll see. I know with a lot of the unique stuff they've picked, I really hope they don't go the route of the games, some of the stuff they've chosen, because a lot of the stuff they've chosen to implement the previous games that have done the initial screening of it have not survived more than a couple of years.
I just really hope that they listen to the people that need to be listened to and not listen to just the loud people, because
that's squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's why we're here doing this, is because we don't want to complain. We're not loud. This is the first time. I only have maybe 160 followers, and I average about 3 viewers a stream. I'm by no means a loud person, but there are loud people out there making comments, and they're not that far different from mine. And then there are other loud people out there that are making lots of comments, and I'm going, why the fuck are you talking?
Cut off the ham before you have a chance to even use it to pick up the hammer.
Exactly. So, needless to say, we'll probably be on this game for how long is completely dependent upon the content.
Correct. No, that's it. I kind of wish they'd picked a slightly different name, because it's so close to Ashes of Singularity, which is like one of the staple benchmarks.
A funny picture went around in my in another Discord that I saw. It was a board game that looked exactly like the same like design of picture on it, and I was like, that could be bad. It was like a phoenix, and it had like drawings in it, whereas this one is like a phoenix, but it looks kind of like a tree. I was concerned. I was like, oh no, copyrights.
I know, right? I can't wait for Oblivion to drop. We need to try to get together whenever Oblivion drops.
Oblivion.
The final Oblivion.
What is this?
It's that's the final expansion for Sentinels in the Multiverse.
Oh, we do. I wish that
I have it pre-ordered. Whenever it's finally starting to go to the printer, so I'm expecting January.
Now, have you kept up on comics recently? Because I'm a little bit behind on those.
Yeah, so, no.
What comics are you, not the Sentinels comics, in general, what comics are you reading right
now? Well, I guess in the last couple months I haven't been reading as much. I've kind of gotten a little marveled out here as of late. I'm not super hip on the DC Rebirth because the New 52 was such garbage. And I feel like the Marvel Cinematic Universe is taking just a little too much precedent over what's actually happening in real Marvel. But I really wish they'd bring She-Hulk back. That was a very interesting comic that kind of got axed really quickly.
So I'm not current on any of my comics, but I've read a few of the Rebirths, and they're better than the 52.
Oh yeah, no, they're about 10 times better. But once again, the New 52 still happened. DC is still trying to get into the movie franchise, and they're still sucking compared to what Marvel's doing.
I will say that Wonder Woman, I just watched that movie the other night.
It's quite a bit better.
Yeah, it was definitely a step in the right direction. They may actually be able to compete with their Justice League movie.
Fucking hope so. Ben Affleck wasn't that bad of a Batman, and you could see how dissatisfied he was with the movie, so maybe they'll let him direct it.
Right? He's actually a really good director.
Yeah. Affleck was the bomb in Venoms, yo.
Exactly.
That's a rollback. What god was that? Clerks 2?
Yes.
Well, they made the joke
in
Jay and
1.
Silent Bob.
Yeah, Jay and Silent Bob. Yeah. Strike Back. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's 15 plus years ago.
Yeah, our age is showing. I'm sorry. What was the other thing? Oh, and then I've been reading a lot of Gwenpool. I'm actually pretty close to current on that. I know you don't really care for the Deadpool genre, but I like the Gwenpool stuff. It's really funny.
Gwenpool's quite a bit better. I mean, He's just a Deathstroke the Terminator clone. That's what
we're not getting into this right
now. No, we are getting into this right now.
No.
The original author wanted to draw Deathstroke the Terminator.
Here
DC didn't want to hire him, so it's like, oh, I'll just make.
Right, you guys can log off
in
now.
The DC,
Stop
or in
listening.
the Marvel universe. You could let your fanboyism spew out all you want. Their origin story is still the same.
Right.
God, his name's Wade Wilson to go along with Slade Wilson, for Christ's sake.
I'm not even going to get into this right now. Okay, everybody, have a good night. Thank you for joining us. We will catch you next time. I'm going to discuss this off stream with him, so have a good night, everyone.
See you later, everybody.